Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations Aloud, where we're having honest conversations on politics, society, and culture. And today, we're discussing what the US Constitution means to US citizens and how it impacts the world through US foreign policy. We're joined by Bud, who is a US Marine Corps based in good old Alabama. Good to have you on board, Bud.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
Awesome. But for a lot of people, me included, based in the UK, we hear a lot about the US Constitution and how it's important for for citizens. Um, what do you believe are the core principles of the US Constitution that define America?
That's a great question. There's many parts to the Constitution that are particularly dealing with different sections of our democracy or how our framework is. But what is most important, especially to most Americans, is what we call the Bill of Rights. And that's the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. What happened is in 1787, the Congress came together and they had realized that the Constitution that they had originally created was lacking a lot of freedoms and rights and those kind of things. So they had a convention, constitutional convention, where they went in and inserted these amendments into the Constitution. So that's the most critical part that separates America from other countries. For instance, like uh, Article One is the ability to have free speech without being jeopardized or, you know, put in jail and those kind of things. Article 2 is, the right to bear arms, keep a weapon, protect yourself, and so forth. So a lot of countries don't have that part. They have parts of the Constitution, which is interesting that a lot of countries have drawn from those sections of our Constitution and put that in their Constitution. So that's the major thing.
So the most important part to you is the kind of the rights that
Yes.
it gives to citizens, and it's interesting that this was an amendment, and it's one of the most important things in the Constitution. So you mentioned there kind of to a democracy, and I think in today's world we're very confused to what is a democracy.
Yeah.
Aside from being able to vote, to you, what defines a democracy, like the
That's
U.S.?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I think a democracy is according to the Constitution. And what that is we are a republic. So we are made up of states, different areas or, different states. And each of those states have representatives for each of those states. So to me, democracy is those states. It's the states representing the whole. That's what the Constitution is laid out. So when somebody says constitutionally in the US, what is democracy? That's the right term for it. However, as you know, a lot of people think democracy should be, you know, the majority. So the 51%, right? So many people in this country want to eliminate the states or virtually eliminate the ability of the states to determine who the president is, not the people. I know it sounds funny. The people vote. The states are the ones that actually vote for the president. But the point I'm making is in a true democracy, 51%. So great example. Venezuela just had an election, right? So those people are voting for that president, and that president gets the majority based on the people, the actual votes of the people, where
Mm.
a democracy represented by the United States is votes of the states. So that's why we call it a republic instead of like a democratic type country. Democracy is the style of government. That's the best way to explain it. It's a representation government. It's a style of government where the people are represented to the government. That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, and it's interesting in the US because I was reading about this, where in the US, when you go voting, you're not actually voting for, yeah, as you mentioned, you're not voting for the president. You're voting for, I forgot what you call them,
They're,
delegates.
delegates, yes,
Yeah, delegates who will vote on your behalf
that's
for
correct.
the president, which is a very interesting way to vote. Um, so you mentioned we were talking about the Constitution. What I hear a lot also is defending the Constitution. What does it mean? Because the Constitution is a, I guess, a number of laws and legislation. What does it mean to defend the Constitution, especially coming from a, you've been in the U.S. Marine Corps. What does that mean to you as a veteran?
Defending the Constitution is defending the I guess one of the phrases that people are used to is rule of law, right? But don't get confused when you're saying rule of law because there's a lot of law that's not in the Constitution, for instance. However, this is how I view it. I view the Constitution as the framework of what our country is. So we do not want that Constitution changed without the people allowing that change, except, and we don't want the Constitution to be trampled on. We don't want the government to ignore it. We don't want individuals to ignore it. For great example, for instance, like there's a lot of uh, things happening in the U.S. that are pretty recent. Recent being the last 5, 10 years that has never happened before. There was this guy that wanted to have a cake made. You may or may not heard that story. This guy in Colorado, and this guy refused to make that cake because he thought it was against his beliefs.
Mm,
Okay. Well, that's his freedom of speech. He's using his freedom of speech saying, I don't want to make this cake, right? Because it offends me based on my beliefs. So that battle, believe it or not, is still going on between the
oh, really?
government, right? But in the past, it would be no question whatsoever. It's like, hey, sorry, dude, you're just gonna have to go get your cake made somewhere else, which you could have. There are many people would have made that cake for him. But
Mm,
at the point. The point is this person don't respect the Constitution, and
yeah.
therefore, right? So that's part of defending it, right?
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, the Constitution is seen as something that is it seen as something that defends the people from the government mostly? From
Absolutely.
from the government.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
you're absolutely correct. If we didn't have specifically those 10 articles that we were talking in this, beginning of ones, right? Because for instance, the press is protected from the government, controlling the press, which by the way, they're doing now. But Constitution is supposed to prevent that from the press being, one-sided type thing. And, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, freedom of religion. These are all things that are basically given to us by God as rights, freedom of religion, speech, not necessarily gun rights, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so you can be a human being, and the government
And
is being prevented from taking those, or supposed to be prevented from taking those rights from us, you know?
yeah. And I guess that's the problem with um power, right? When you get into power, it impacts you. I think it impacts any human being. And so there needs to be that level of protection, which we don't want to rely on too much, but it needs to be there to protect in certain circumstances. The one thing that I guess a lot of people are um, confused about outside of the US is one particular one, which is the right to bear arms. All right. I think in the US, is it a controversial thing still in the US as much as it is like outside the US? Or is it just a norm accepted thing?
Oh, it's always been an issue. It kinda goes back and forth in waves, right? So, for instance, we're moving towards more states giving and protecting that right than in the past. Give you a great this is a great example of how important that constitutional right is. A lot of states before the Obama era, right, or during the Obama era, required or denied people to concealed carry weapon, right? Or they had to apply for a license, etc. The Constitution says the right to bear arms. It doesn't say the right for the government to give somebody a license to bear arms. Outright, it says you can carry a weapon in the conversation. There's no question. It cannot be,
Mm,
disputed. Can't be infringed upon. That's what the Constitution said. So, but a lot of states try to limit as much as possible that. But now it's swinging back. So now we have a lot of states that are going back, going, you don't need a license anymore. The Constitution gives you the right to carry that weapon.
Yeah,
So,
what's your thoughts on the argument that sure, the Constitution says the right to bear arms, but that was written about, 300 years ago when arms was something completely different to what we have today, right?
right.
Today we have just amazing stuff that you can purchase that can fire rounds that would
Sure.
only be imaginable back in those days. What's
Sure.
your thoughts on that?
The there's that argument goes back and forth, and there is certain valid points to it. But we have to go back to the intent. What did the founding fathers intend when they said the right to bear arms? Because within that is the right to form a militia, right? So it's all in the same area. And a lot of people take out of that verbiage or don't even talk about it, is that part about forming a militia. What that meant was the people have the right to arm themselves against the federal government. Now, part of what you're saying is true. Obviously, it would be very difficult for the American citizens if they decided to really go against the government with arms, per se. We don't have tanks, we don't have airplanes, we don't have artillery pieces, etc. So we get that. But the intent of the Second Amendment is the fact of the government can't just come into your house and take your stuff and arrest you. That's the purpose of the right to bear arms, to protect yourself from the government. If we didn't have that right, everybody in this country will be subject to whatever the government wants to put on. You don't pay your taxes, they come to your house and arrest you.
Mm,
And that has happened in communist countries all over the world for hundreds of years. For
yeah.
instance, go back to China when China started communism and they didn't have any of these rights. They had guns, but they didn't have the rights. So China took over all the farmers. They killed all the people that didn't agree with the government. Our right to bear arms helps prevent that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and you do see it today, governments coming in and doing those things. It's, yeah, it's kind of goes back and forth where there's a a lot of drawbacks and there's a lot of benefits to it, and it's hard
Right.
to pinpoint where to put your finger on that. How does the Constitution shape, I guess, the responsibilities and duties of the citizens? Because I understand kind of the line it kind of brings about between citizens and the government, but how does it
Mhm.
shape the responsibilities of citizens?
That's the same thing where we're talking about the cake situation, right? It's that person against that person. It's not the government, right? Still, that person's First Amendment rights are being trampled on. So the Constitution is protecting him from another citizen. That's just one example. This happens all the time. And what about property, for instance, right? The government does not have the right to just come in and take your property, nor does anybody else. So it's not just the right to prevent the government from taking your property. Your property is your property. So you can't if somebody comes in and tries to steal your property, the Constitution is what protects you to use the law to convict that person for trying to steal your property. So it affects
Mm.
the Constitution don't just affect a person against the government. It affects people against other people and other instances, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So that's the
Um,
strength of the Constitution.
yeah, it's kind of, I guess, it's a foundation to a civil society that
That's
works
correct.
together and that operates, and it creates that environment. When it comes to free speech, it's a big discussion today, and for good reasons because
Yes.
you know I think a lot of people come to the US to the UK, for example. One of the reasons is freedoms, right? Another is security, another is opportunity, and freedom is a really important thing. People don't, I guess, appreciate it as much because, especially people who've lived in a society that is free, because they don't understand what a society that isn't free, how that operates, right? Um, but Is there a line? Would there ever should there ever be a line between what you can say? It's very confusing between kind of we want to have free speech, but is there a line where we cross and that results in inciting hatred?
Mhm.
How do we find that line?
That is the number one question in not just America, but the world today. So let's go back to what the founding fathers meant when we were talking about free speech. Most of that meant that you have the right to protest against your government. That's really the initial part of that.
Hmm.
We cannot, as the government, hold you accountable if you're a Republican and you're bashing a Democrat or vice versa, right? You can say whatever you want to say. Now, but we have to put ourselves in the context of the lifestyle. How did these people live back then? The majority of these people were God fearing people, right? They had respect for each other. They I mean, just using a cuss word was a bad thing, if you follow me, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So this kind of law fit in there really good because there wasn't it's not necessarily was necessarily designed to prevent somebody from saying something against somebody else. That was kind of like a given back then, right?
Hmm.
But today is totally different. Today is completely different. What I mean by that is you have people that do not have the moral standing to respect other people, and therefore they attack other people with all kind of words and stuff. And now if it goes to physical violence, it's a whole different discussion, obviously.
Well, why do you think
Should
that is? Why has that changed?
because society, because of how people grew up, for instance, when I went to school, I graduated high school in 1981. So just to give you a little time frame there. It wasn't that long ago, right? 40 something years ago.
Yeah.
But when I went to school, the rules apply. You didn't cuss, you didn't uh, attack people, right? Verbally. I mean, you went to the principal's office and got your butt spanked, if you know what I mean, right?
The
I
the
mean, it
ruler
was
will the
serious
ruler would
business,
come out. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, if you go, and I know this personally because I have grandkids in school, right? And they're 11, 8, 11 years old. And it's not uncommon for them to just blurt out a cuss word or get mad at something or whatever. And they're 8 and 11.
Hmm.
And the point is it's acceptable now in a lot of cultures for, people to be that. But what that causes, it causes a individual if they talk bad at themselves or whatever, then they think they can use the same language against other people. So, is there a line that needs to be drawn? If there is, I haven't got a clue, as it based on the Constitution, how we would draw that line, other than re-educating people again. You follow me?
Hmm.
Is the line would be okay? We're going to prevent people from attacking people and hate speech and all that by replacing those values back into the education system. It's going to it take years and years for this to finish, but that's the only way I see it. I don't
Yeah.
think you can do it with a government law saying, okay, you can't scream at this person or whatever. That's because then n- who determines where it applies, right?
Yeah.
Very hard subject to discuss.
It is difficult, and the more power you give that to the government, you can easily it can easily turn into something that like what we in the 1930s in Germany and things like that, where the government says what you can say and what you cannot say, and
Right.
one law here, one law there, then it trickles into something very dangerous. And I guess when it comes to uh, children, I think one thing is also we are exposed today to so much
Yes.
that I don't think we were
Absolutely.
exposed to in the 1980s. I mean, you just take out your phone and you're just seeing so much.
Oh yeah. It's
We're
it's
not our
incredible.
brain is not made for that much stimulation, and it's very hard to create a filter for that in
Well,
today's
think
world.
about think about this, Hadi, is it's I personally, I'm 61 years old. I personally make it a point not to spend all that time I have
Mm.
to make myself not be involved and seeing all this stuff. For instance, I no longer have a Facebook page and all. I got tired of it.
Yeah.
That's a great example. Now, if I'm 61 and I'm doing this, why can't our parents, right, which some are, control that information that's being presented to the kids? I'll tell you why. It's money, it's big business, and they're going to get to whoever they need to get to with whatever media they need to get to. So it's difficult. You're right, it's difficult for us to live in a society today
Mm.
when wait till we can't figure out what's true and what's not anymore.
That's what I fear a lot, and you could see it happening already now.
Absolutely.
You just don't
Absolutely.
know what channel to connect to get your information, because nowadays you're not really being informed, you're being told,
Yeah.
what to think. Um,
Programmed or whatever word you want to use. Yep.
yeah, with how the algorithm works, it just shows you what you wanna believe, what you already believe, and it kind of creates this cycle. So it is very dangerous. I think that's one of the biggest, dangers, that we're facing in today's society. Um, when it comes to the Constitution, do people understand it now? I mean, I think there's a trend, I think, across the world where the younger generation have less of an understanding around these concepts that nations are built on, simply because I guess when a country goes through a lot of difficulty, they value those things that brought the nations together. Countries that been through war understand the value of things that led to the war, that led away from the war, and they study that a lot more because we don't want to be in that situation again. But for the younger generation, they haven't experienced that. I haven't experienced that, to some extent. But so do you see younger people understanding the Constitution?
No, I mean, that's a very simple way to put it. Uh, the way the United States is arranged, right? And the best way to explain this has a lot to do with what you're saying, especially when it deals with who knows the Constitution and who doesn't. So you have conservative states, you have liberal states, and you have what they call purple state, kind of a mixture, right? The majority of the liberals in this country are trying to break down America. They want it to be a democracy, the 51%, all that kind of stuff. The conservatives, on the other hand, are exact opposite. We like the republic. We like the Constitution. We like the respect of each other. We like our rights. I mean, etc. So what's happening is the Constitution is more ingrained in the conservative type values than the liberal type values. So there's a lot of states these kids go through K through 12 and even into college, and they're not even taught the Constitution. They don't even know what the hell it is. Here's a great example. There's a guy that was on the sidewalk just interviewing, kids, college level kids, and asked them a very simple question, which obviously is part of the Constitution. It's the major part of the Constitution. What is the three branches of the US government? And 80% of these kids couldn't even answer the question. Just knowing the executive president, the judicial system, right? Supreme Court, Congress. I mean,
Mhm,
I knew that when I was probably 6. Ex
mhm.
how the government was divided up or whatever. A lot of this is not being taught anymore for a purpose. They want to eliminate the Constitution. That's the truth.
Why do you say that? What makes you say that?
Because 'cause I've talked to people that actually say that.
Say
Let me
what?
give you an
That
example. That the Constitution's crap. It ain't nothing but a piece of paper that needs to go away. My
mm,
son told me that one day. He thinks different now, but he was in college. He was at the university or, Virginia Tech, right? He was in college, and we were having this discussion. I said, "The Constitution, that's the law of the land. That's what our country's built on." He says, "It's a piece of crap. It ain't nothing but a piece of paper." I was shocked. I was. That, you know, a 20-year-old would think that the Constitution is worthless.
and why do
What
you
I
think he
mean,
was saying that?
I think he just had this discussion with these people in college and, was convinced that, maybe our system of government is not right or, needs to be changed or whatever. Now, here's the strange part. He graduates college and joins the Marine Corps. Then his whole world changed. Then he understood the purpose of the Constitution, the purpose of our what we would call our democracy. So, yeah, the answer is no. A lot of these kids haven't got a clue what the Constitution. They've never been taught it.
And what impact do you think that will have on the
Well,
US?
there's already a huge impact on it. The huge impact on it. Just the other day in Philadelphia, there was a huge, gigantic Communist Party of America march downtown Philadelphia. And there were a crap load of people. Never seen that before in this country ever. Not
And
like that.
what do you think they want exactly?
They want the country to turn into a communism where everybody is equal, the terminology, right? But what they don't understand is no, everybody is either here at the bottom, led by tyranny at the top. That's what communism is. They tell you, they dictate your life, what you can and can't do. Why do you
Mm.
think you have so many cameras in China? So they can watch all these people and dictate and find the criminals, those kind of things. So they don't understand. Really, a lot of these kids do not understand what communism is because they never lived in a country with communism. They're just being taught in a lot of the college and institutions that, America is bad. This breaks my heart because this didn't happen 10 years ago. People didn't actually come out outright and say it. Even we even have politicians are saying that our system of government needs to be changed. And I'm just going, whoa. It's we're in a turmoil situation when it's associated with our government. It's just,
So
but the
that's
Constitution is what holds it together.
yeah. So that's interesting because I think a lot of people will say, the Constitution is great. Our the government may need updating of how it's operating. It seems to, there's no perfect government.
Right.
Any system has gaps and holes
Sure.
in it. Take capitalism or socialism or whatever it is. Um, the one thing that's interesting that I've always been fascinated with the U.S. government is that the power of lobbying, and I'm just taking a bit of a bit of an angle there. The power of lobbying, which we don't see like in the UK, we don't see it as powerful as it is in the US, especially like when it comes to lobbying that is related to foreign countries, for example. What's like as an example, the thing that I hear a lot about is APAC as an
Mm.
example, which is one of the most powerful
Yes.
lobbying. And I get the whole point of lobbying, but when it comes to lobbying for a foreign country, that is something that's very
Yes.
odd. What's
Well,
your thoughts about that?
my first thought is this. Seriously, there should be zero, absolute zero lobbying in the United States. Lobbying was never intended in the Constitution whatsoever. It's the people, not organizations, right? The government is the people. Well, that changed when they put laws in place to allow people to lobby, representatives. So now you have power and money dictating the direction of the country instead of the people. And let me ask you this. This is how I put it. Do you think a Jewish person, specifically is associated with APAC, should have a louder voice than everybody else? Well, they do if they have a lobby organization that's lobbying for 'em, especially that lobby is coming from outside of our country. If there was no such thing as lobbying, the corporations could not be associated with the federal government and be in bed with them, all that stuff. The only people that would have the direct voice is the people. And this is how the Constitution was set up. So what has happened, Hadi, is real simple. We have had people come into our government as representatives, as presidents, as Supreme Court justices, and have put their conceptual idea into our government on how the government should operate instead of going to the Constitution going, nope, we're not supposed to do this. So the best way to explain it is our Constitution, day by day by day, from the beginning of when it was put in place, has been destructed. It has been chipped away over and over again. Now, this is not new. Rome, in the Roman days, they had a quote constitution type thing. They fell the same way. The
Mm.
government started being corrupted and not following what that original design of Rome was. So, the Constitution is important as the foundation, but what happens when the foundation starts crumbling? Then it's free for all, right? And I think
Yeah.
this is what is happening with the lobbying thing is the power has been taken away from people and given to the big corporations and organizations to rule over us.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what do you see as the solution to move away from that?
To be honest with you, I don't know if there is one. The reason I say that is because once a law is in place, so there's a law in America that allows lobbying. Well, their only way to change that law is from the same bodies that created it. So the legislative body would have to go and vote to pull that out. So let's say you're in bed with, 16 different companies, right? Now, the reason the lobby, give you an example, the reason they do the lobbying. So for instance, let's say I'm in Kentucky and you're a senator in my state and I want to bring military bases, big bases into Kentucky so that my economy grows and all that, right? So you're going to have Northrop Grumman, you're going to have all of these different companies, right, that have government contracts for the military lobby you to bring that into that organization, kind of stuff. That's how lobbying works. So the only way to change that is you have to change the law to prevent it from to tell them you can no longer do this. And the only way to change that law is it has to be brought back into a legislative body and voted on to pull it out or to rescind that law. That is not going to happen in the political environment that we have today. It will never happen. There's not enough. No,
Mm.
I'll never get enough votes on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see America is better when there's more power to the states as opposed to
Absolutely,
individual?
absolutely. And here's the strange part that I can't understand is back in the day, if you didn't like your state, how your state was, right, then you moved out. You moved into a state that was better suited for you. Well, this is happening today at a huge rate on both sides, mainly
Mm.
from liberals in moving into conservative states,
From
right,
California to Texas, right?
to Texas and so forth, right? The reason behind that is because the policies are choking these people. So a lot of these conservatives going, it's it. California's dead or New York's dead. I've got to go somewhere else. So they're going to try to find a state, in this case, Texas, that is not quite conservative, but not quite liberal. So it's kind of like in between, right? So that's kind of like back, that's how they were 15 years ago in California. So they're going back to kind of like what they're used to, right?
Mm.
And then you have real true conservatives that feel that their voice has been cut away. So they're moving to Alabama and Mississippi and Florida and places like that because, Alabama, holy snikes, it's got to be like 92% conservative, hands
Mm.
down. I mean,
I can
this is
imagine.
the conservative state.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. But so a lot of people are moving from other states that are true conservative into places like Alabama, Mississippi, etc. So
And when you say conservative, what does that mean to you?
it means less government power. So Alabama has, and Alabama is just one of the states like that, right? There's a lot less restriction on businesses and individuals, right? For instance, and like tax laws are very low. My taxes, I have basically a $500,000 house and property, right? And I pay basically the same amount of taxes on property taxes every year on this house that somebody in California that probably lives in an $80,000 house,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Mm,
So there's a huge, huge difference in taxes, from gas taxes to if you go to California right now, perfect example. Gas is over $6 a gallon. Right? It's $2.85 here.
oh wow, okay, I
It's
didn't realize
less than
such a
half, right?
yeah, that's crazy.
This now you're saying, well, wait a minute, gas is like national, right? However, economy is not. There's a national economy, but economy is really states. States are ones determine,
Mm.
their economy. So each state is there's no two states alike. I guarantee you. You can cross over to Tennessee and you can see differences there, or go to, you know,
And so that difference is a tax difference? Just more taxes on the $6?
it's not just taxes. That's just part of it. But yes, there is tax difference, but then there's lifestyle difference. Give you an example. There's a whole lot of churches in Alabama, as an example, right? Well, if you go to California, there's a lot less churches in California. So that's a difference, right? This got nothing to do with whether you're liberal or conservative. It's lifestyle. It's what your moral fiber is made out of.
Mm,
So
mm,
so depending on where you live, many people love living in the city because everything is kind of taken care of. You got mass transportation. You can basically, go out of your apartment and go and walk and eat any type of food you want to eat. Those so some people love living in that environment, right? But you're going to pay for it because it's expensive. However, I live in rural Alabama. My nearest neighbor, is across the main road, which is probably about a mile and a half away, and I'm
mm.
30 minutes from anything. Of course,
Yeah.
I'm
Quiet and
pretty sure you,
peace.
right? You know what Walmart is, right?
Yeah.
The big chain Walmart. Well, that's the thing in America. They're everywhere, right?
Mm.
I'm 30 minutes from Walmart. And
That's
people are
how you
going,
know you're you're not
exactly.
anywhere
Now you
close.
know. So I'm sure in England they have places like that, that are so far off that, that's
Yeah.
the rural world, right? I
Yeah,
love living like this.
yeah, no, I'm sure there's a beauty to it. I think the interesting thing is, for a lot of people outside of the US, we think of the US as just the US. But the more you look into it, it's actually so many different countries in the US with different kind of belief systems and values and economies, which we sometimes forget about because we're just not living there. Um, when it comes to I think you mentioned we were talking before before the podcast. You mentioned that you were part of an organization that was trying to move more of the power away from the federal government to the states. Can you just kind of maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Convention of States. That's the organization. And our goal is to bring the states together because according to Article 5 of the Constitution, Article 5 allows the Constitution to be amended in two different ways. Most Americans are familiar with the number one way, where Congress decides to write up an amendment. It passes Congress. Once it goes through Congress, it's sent out to the states. And three-fourths of the states must ratify or approve the amendment. And once it gets approved, then it gets actually put in the Constitution. However, there's a second way to do it. The state representatives, right, for all 50 states can come in, have their own convention, and write up amendments. They're called proposals. So they're amendment proposals. Once that constitution or that convention's done, then those proposals are sent to Congress. Now, here's the interesting part. During that constitution or during that convention, the federal government and Congress, none of them can be part of that convention. It's just the states, period. They're not even invited. The only role the federal government gives in this process is to provide a location to hold the convention. That's it. All right. Once those amendments, proposed amendments are done, in this case, three of them that we're talking about, balanced budget, term limits for all of them, including people that are appointed, we're called appointed bureaucracies. And the third one is reducing the size of our federal government. Those, once they're all written up and voted on in that convention, that's sent to Congress. Then it's got to go back out to the states, just like the one we're used to, and get ratified again. So we're
And so
trying to add those three things in there so we can control the federal government. For instance, this rogue spending, this out of control spending, all of that can be controlled through the people's voice.
do you think it is possible there is a world where the federal government can balance the budget? It just to me seems such a distant thing.
You're not gonna believe this. You're not gonna believe this, but it actually happened here in the United States. And listen to what I'm telling you, because this is interesting.
Alright.
Bill Clinton.
Mm,
Bill Clinton was the one that did it in 1995, 94. No, maybe it was 92. I think it's 92. He actually got the budget balanced while
so it's
he was
possible.
president, right?
It is possible.
If
Okay.
now
Good
I'm
to
not
know.
talking about, now listen, there's a difference. Balancing the budget's one thing, lowering the deficit, that's totally different. People try to put them together, what's not. Balancing the budget means, okay, we took in this much money into the federal government, right? We're going to add all our expenses and it's going to equal to that money that came in. We don't have to add more money to it. So, but yeah, Bill
Yeah,
Clinton did that. That's truth.
that's good. That's good
That's,
to
I
know.
think
So
it's the first time it's
it's
ever, probably
achievable.
might have been first up in history.
That's awesome. Um, I know I could be speaking to you for a very long time. I just wanted
Sure.
to touch on kind of we talked a lot about the US,
Hmm.
inside of the US, and what the Constitution means. I want to go a bit to kind of foreign policy slightly. Um, a lot of people have grievances, I feel, with the US
Yes.
because of its foreign policy. And it seems like, America in America is different to America outside of America. Um, especially in the regions like, the Middle East and kind of there's a lot now you can read about the covert operations and all the
All right.
different kind of
Right.
countries.
Yeah.
Um, I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on kind of the balance between defending U.S. interests uh, and respecting the sovereignty of other nations?
That's, that's a very good question. So again, I hate putting it this way, but there's two parts to the US. There's the actual American citizens, and then there's this thing they call the federal government, right? Unfortunately, the majority of this uh, going back and forth and with all these different countries happens through the government, right? Whether it's the president, vice president, ambassadors, all that stuff. Foreign policy is derived, but it should be derived from American citizens. We should be the one driving our government on how our government acts with other countries. But because I'll be upfront, because our government is so corrupt and so power hungry and so in bed with so many different agencies, specifically companies that make war weapons and stuff like that, right? It's billions and billions of dollars.
Hmm,
So they're going out to all of these different countries, putting a force, right? We're like America, America, right? Well, it's honey, it's real simple. Americans want the same thing that everybody else wants. We just want to have our country. We want to have peace. We want to live our lives. This is what the true Americans want, right? Just like,
yeah.
for instance, great example. It took the attack on Pearl Harbor before America would get involved in World War II.
Hmm,
That's great.
yeah.
That's a perfect example of what America really was as a country going, look, you guys, you go out there and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be aggressive. I hate to say this. We are becoming aggressive now. That has never happened in the United States where we just go. Well, I'm talking big countries. Now, I'm not talking about, little places because we've done that before. We've taken over little areas, taken over the Indian lands and stuff. We all get that. But what I'm
Yeah.
talking about now is we're talking about some serious, serious issues that involve millions of people's lives, specifically with the nuclear weapons and stuff like that. So, for
Yeah.
instance, the Ukraine, the majority, a huge majority, 70% or so of Americans saying we are wasting money sending money to the Ukraine, absolutely wasting it. But the political parties, they have a huge, huge money at stake situation with the Ukraine, and that's why they're doing it. So, foreign policy wise, Americans are getting screwed by the government supporting Ukraine, and
Yeah.
that's the
And
truth.
and thanks for sharing that. And you said corruption, you meant in terms of lobbying, or what kind of corruption
All of
that's
that, all
corruption?
that's part of it. For instance, a lot of politicians will say X, and it's normal in politicians, right? To get elected as a senator or a representative or even as a president. Then they get into that power and they forget about all this stuff that they were supposed to do for you. And instead, they start doing stuff for the political elites and for their interests. And that's why we call it the swamp. Unfortunately, and I've seen it before, really, really good, I mean, true hearted Americans that get elected as senators and legislators, and they go in to the politics in DC and they become just as corrupted as everybody else.
Hmm.
And it's really, really sad. The reason behind that is because unless you play the game, you can't accomplish anything. So they use this what they call a trade-off, right? I'll give you this, you give me that, right? And
Yeah.
and it's just that's the way it's been for years and years. But then you have people now, there's a couple wonderful ladies in there specifically, Marjorie Taylor Greene, et cetera. I don't know if you keep up with politics, but their values and the morals are still there and they're fighting for the American people. They could care less what any other representative or any loyal or a lobbyist company or whatever tells them. Some of these people take zero lobby money, none. They don't take any money. They're like Trump. They're using a lot of their own funds to, to be part of the legislation. So that we just need a whole lot more people like that, and then we can fix our government.
Yeah, and, I hope to see more of that. I think we might be reversing to move more towards
Yeah,
people that value those things because they've
yeah.
seen what if we don't value those things, what it might result in. Um, but it was great speaking to you. Is there? I mean, where can people reach you or learn more about kind of your organization?
Okay. Well, personally wise, I have a podcast called The Patriot Cause. You can get it on any podcast app, or you can go to Rumble. I'm also on Rumble, The Patriot Cause on Rumble. Um, but the organization that I work with is called Convention Estates. So you can go to conventionestates.com.
Perfect, and we'll put that in the description. But thanks so much for your time. Hope to speak to you very soon.
Heidi, thank you again. Take care of England and
Try my
specifically
best.
London. Yeah, y'all be nice to each other, would you? Same here. Take care,
Great.
Heidi.